Velkommen til vores webinar med Masterclass og Peter Fisk. Vi har set rigtig meget frem til den her aften, hvor vi får lov til både at høre, hvad Peter Fisk ser af trends og muligheder, og hvordan man skal navigere i en verden, der er mere og mere kompleks, hvordan man skal arbejde med sin strategi og vækstplaner i en kompleks virkelighed. Det får vi lov til at opleve sammen, og samtidig så vil vi også præsentere vores nye programmer og muligheder i Lead the Change. Jeg hedder Ahmed Gynes, og det er mig, der er vært for den her webinar. Og mens at flere stille og roligt joiner, så vil jeg kort gennemgå vores agenda for i dag. Jeg starter ud med en kort introduktion til Lead the Change og vores programmer. Og derfra så går Peter på og har cirka en halv time, 35 minutter til en gennemgang af hans keynote. Og til sidst der bruger vi noget tid på at besvare spørgsmål, både i forhold til de programmer, vi kører, men også i forhold til nogle af de ting, som Peter måske har brugt hans keynote på. Hvis der er nogle spørgsmål undervejs, så må I rigtig gerne bruge chatten, og så vil vi på den måde samle op til sidst, hvis der er noget, vi kører på, og så er det først til sidst, at vi tager spørgsmålene. Til en start vil jeg kort præsentere vores forskellige programmer i Lead the Change. Vi har nogle forskellige forløb, vi har udviklet, og dem vil jeg prøve at gennemgå nu her. Vi laver vores forskellige executive-programmer og forløb i samarbejde med IE Business School. IE Business School er ikke super kendt i Danmark, men det er de egentlig i mange andre dele af verden. De er trippel-akkrediteret som en af de få, eller som blandt de få universiteter, som har trippel-akkrediteringer. Og det står egentlig i virkeligheden og viser den kvalitet, som IE Business School de står for. De er også blevet udnævnt som verdens bedste online MBA, og det har de faktisk fået 3 år i streg, at de er blevet udnævnt som verdens bedste inden for det at drive online MBA-forløb. Og det er ikke kun på Financial Times, der er også andre undersøgelser ved Forbes og QS, mange forskellige institutioner, som er inde og kigge på kvaliteten af uddannelserne. Og det er en af årsagen til, at vi også har valgt at samarbejde med IE omkring vores forløb. Det er simpelthen fordi, vi kan se, at der er en rigtig høj kvalitet, og tilfredsheden på forløbene er meget, meget høj. De er også rigtig gode til arbejdet med founders, og de founders, eller startup founders, der har været deltagende på deres MBA'er, vurderer det også til at være rigtig, rigtig højt. Så samlet set et universitet, som er kendt, som sagt, i andre dele af verden, særligt i de spansktalende lande. De er selv fra Spanien og har hovedsæde i Spanien, men bruger også, eller har rigtig mange aktiviteter i både Mellemøsten og i Sydamerika, men også i USA. Og vi samarbejder så med dem omkring aktiviteterne i Danmark blandt andet. Og igennem IE har vi også fået kontakt med Peter Fisk, som I kommer til at stifte bekendtskab med i dag. Peter er en globalt anerkendt både professor og bestselling author, og hjælper mange af de største virksomheder i verden med deres strategi og udvikling. Men har også et særligt fokus på startups og de mange startups, der måske får tilført noget kapital og kan ligesom se en stejl vækstrejse foran sig. Så har han været meget tæt i forløb med dem og rådgiver dem. Og derfor i virkeligheden den helt rigtige til at forme de her uddannelser sammen med. Peter har været med ind over til at forme de programmer, som vi tilbyder i Lead the Change, og er vores akademiske direktør. I kommer til at møde Peter lige om lidt, og i virkeligheden være den gennemgående tråd i flere af vores aktiviteter. Vi har lavet 3 forskellige forløb i Lead the Change, så jeg kommer til at præsentere 2 af dem i dag. Strategy and Growth Program, og så vores Executive Management Program. Og det har lidt forskellige, kan man sige, indhold og målgruppe. Og i det vi også kommer til at præsentere i dag, det er faktisk de støttemuligheder, der er for at kunne få tilskud, hvis man ellers lever op til de krav. Så er der muligheden for at få enten 100% eller 50% af forløbene dækket igennem nogle forskellige støtteordninger, som vi kan hjælpe med. Jeg hopper ud i det første program, som er Strategy and Growth Program. Og det er egentlig et program, som er designet til SMV-ejerledere eller medejere af virksomheder, som har maks 7 år på banen. Altså man må maks have haft sit CVR-nummer i 7 år. Og det vil være et forløb, som er designet til at skabe vækst i virksomheder og sikre en klar strategi. Vi starter ud med et kick-off arrangement, hvor vi både giver værktøjer til at kunne styrke ens egen ledelsesprofil igennem noget Garuda-profil, men derudover arbejder vi på en strategisk case, hvor vi sikrer, at virksomhederne får den nødvendige, kan man sige, fokus på deres strategi. Det vil være det første step i programmet. Når man har været med på den kick-off, så er man igennem 4 moduler i samarbejde med AI og Peter, hvor vi får undervisning i både, hvordan fremtidens forretningsmodeller ser ud, hvordan man skal arbejde med ens strategi, derudover kigge på de vækststrategier og den i virkeligheden tendenserne, der er, udviklingerne, der er, trends, der er i markedet, som man skal være opmærksom på, når man planlægger sin strategi som virksomhed. Vi kommer til at berøre cirkulær økonomi og det arbejde med bæredygtighed som en del af ens forretningsstrategi. Og så sidst arbejder med innovation i øjenhøjde, hvor vi fokuserer på også det at skabe nye forretningsmodeller, og ikke kun innovere på nye produkter, men i virkeligheden kigge på, hvordan man kan gå til markedet på en ny måde. Alle de her input og inspirationer får man som virksomhedsleder og skal forholde sig til efterfølgende. Hvordan vil jeg i virkeligheden sikre, at min case og min strategi for virksomheden er alignet, så vi sikrer, at vi arbejder med de rigtige ting og prioriterer de rigtige ting. Der vil man så få muligheden for at få en sparring med en konsulent fra Lead the Change, hvor vi også går ind og kigger på om at kunne kvalificere den her case. Til sidst, der er der en afsluttende workshop, hvor vi også har muligheden for at præsentere en strategi og case for andre, både også i Lead the Change, men i høj grad også de øvrige deltagere på forløbet. Og her er det meningen, at man ikke kun får muligheden for at præsentere, men faktisk også at spare med andre omkring sin egen situation, fordi at man mange gange vil være i lignende situation, har muligheden for her at drøfte med andre SMV-ejerledere og andre ledere fra SMV'er, hvad er egentlig det, de har tænkt, og hvordan kan man måske spare med hinanden og udvikle idéer. Så på den måde er det et program, der skal være med til at udvikle ikke kun sin egen virksomhed. Man kommer til at også få sparring fra Lead the Change. Man får netværk med andre deltagere, og så får man undervisning og workshops i verdensklasse igennem AI. Samlet set 4 online workshops og moduler fra AI, udover de aktiviteter, som jeg har beskrevet før og efter forløbet. En kombination, hvor vi sikrer, at det er de nyeste teorier, som er målrettet den virkelighed, som man som dansk virksomhed lever i. Et forløb, der normalt koster 34.000 kroner, hvis man gerne vil købe det. Også hvis man ikke er SMV og gerne vil ligesom inspireres igennem den her række af aktiviteter og forløb, jamen så koster det 34.000. Der er den mulighed lige nu, at der er nogle puljer igennem det, der hedder Iværksætter Danmark, og Next Step, der gør, at man kan få 100% dækket de omkostninger, der er til forløbet. Og det er noget, som vi også kan hjælpe med at komme lidt tilbage til. Forløbsopstart er en gang i august måned, det er det, vi planlægger efter, hvor man ligesom skal afsætte samlet set 4 dages kan man sige, aktivitet af her. Muligheden for at få dækket forløbet, der har man som sagt som SMV, og særligt hvis man har under 7 år på banen som CVR-nummer, så har man muligheden for at søge den her pulje. Og det er noget, vi kan være behjælpelige med, så vi både sparer med omkring, hvad det er, I står overfor af udvikling og strategi, og være med til at lave det første udkast, som I selv retter og sender ind igennem portalen. Og det vil bare være vigtigt selvfølgelig at sige, at der er nogle krav til både modning og hvor man er som virksomhed, og det vil vi kunne understøtte igennem Lead the Change. Det næste forløb, vi har, er vores mini-MBA, vores Executive Management Program, og det er egentlig et forløb, som vi har designet til lidt mere modne SMV'er. Her har man muligheden for at få 50% af de omkostninger dækket til forløbet, som normalt koster 80.000 kroner. Der kan man få dækket 50% af omkostningerne igennem en pulje også. Her arbejder vi også med en strategisk case, som har lidt mere tyngde, og vi er inde og spare med den enkelte virksomhedsleder og den enkelte deltager fra virksomheden i højere grad, så der er flere sparringssessioner, og vi vil også i starten og til slut ligesom lave nogle instruktioner til forløbet, hvor man bliver klogere på sig selv og sin strategi. Derudover så har vi også flere moduler i det her forløb. Der har vi i alt 10 moduler, som man kommer igennem. Nogle af de moduler, som der også var på Strategy and Growth, har vi også med her, så de første par moduler, blandt andet fremtidens forretninger, megatrends, nye forretningsmodeller, innovation og bæredygtighed. Det har vi, men så går vi også over i nogle andre moduler, som fokuserer på AI og teknologi, hvad der sker på det område, og hvordan man også skal tage højde for den teknologiske udvikling i sin strategi, og i virkeligheden i hele organisationens udvikling. Vi arbejder også med kundepsykologi og adfærdspsykologi, hvor vi har undervisere med fra AI også, og her fokuserer vi i høj grad også på, hvordan man kan kigge på forskellige prismodeller, hvordan man kan forstå sine kunder bedre, og på den måde sikre en større succes, når man lancerer nye produkter, når man prissætter sine produkter, og når man skal have organisationen til at bevæge sig i en mere bæredygtig retning. Så tager vi til Spanien og har 2 undervisningsdage i Madrid og i Segovia, hvor vi både fokuserer på det at arbejde med ledelse. Vi har 2 moduler med henholdsvis Mark Fritz og Jill Payne, som hver især fokuserer på det at lede, og det at sikre, at man som team går i samme retning, man kommunikerer på en måde, der sikrer, at organisationen er et sted, som føler sig tryg, og som kan se sig igennem alle de mange forandringer, som man skal igennem. Så der vil der være 2 moduler specifikt om det, og derudover har vi igen 2 moduler med Peter til sidst, som kommer til at afslutte med et fokus på det at accelerere en transformation og arbejde med transformation og resultater i sin organisation. Så samlet set et program, hvor man både får igen arbejdet med sin virksomhedscase, man får verdensklasse undervisning og får de her 6 online moduler og 4 fysiske moduler i Spanien. Og her er der så igen muligheden for selvfølgelig at få et meget stærkt netværk blandt andre ambitiøse ledere, og lige nu har der de her puljer igennem SMV Pro, hvor man har muligheden for at få 50% af forløbet dækket. Og på samme måde som det andet forløb, så er der altså nogle krav til det her forløb. Hvis man skal have noget støtte, så vil det betyde, at man skal være en dansk SMV, der har mellem 2 og 249 medarbejdere, og der må man ikke have en årlig omsætning på over de 50 millioner euro. Og man skal have minimum 1 årsregnskab. Alt det her, det er noget, som vi kan hjælpe med, både den anden pulje, og det her er noget, vi kan understøtte med, så hvis man har brug for sparring og rådgivning i den kontekst, så tager vi selvfølgelig meget gerne en snak omkring det her. Der er nogle videoer, som vi gerne vil sende til efterfølgende, hvor I kan høre nogle af de tidligere deltagere, der har deltaget på vores forløb, hvad de har at sige. Samlet set i hvert fald kan vi godt afsløre, at der er meget høj tilfredshed med både den undervisning, Peter har, men i høj grad også de øvrige moduler, som forløbene består af. Jeg vil bare opfordre til at sige, at der er nogle ansøgningsrunder nu her, og man har muligheden for ligesom at komme med på den næste runde, som er Strategy and Growth-programmet. Der har man en ansøgningsdeadline, der hedder den 20. marts, og vi kan sagtens hjælpe med og ligesom få jer i mål inden da. På samme måde er der en deadline en gang medio april på Executive Management Program i forhold til ansøgningen. Som sagt er forløbende først noget, der starter en gang efter sommerferien. Og det kan jo også være, at man sidder og tænker, at jeg skal egentlig ikke have noget funding til det. Jeg synes bare, det er nogle spændende programmer, som I tilbyder. Kan jeg ikke komme med uden? Det kan I sagtens. Uagtet hvad jeres situation er, så vil vi anbefale, at I booker et møde med os. En af vores kolleger, enten mig eller en af vores andre kolleger, vil kunne understøtte den dialog og den sparring, som der er brug for i forhold til programmerne, og give jer en endnu mere grundig gennemgang af det, jeg lige har præsenteret her. Så jeg håber, at det gav et lille indblik i, hvad vi tilbyder og hvad vi arbejder på aktuelt lige nu. Men derudover så er jeg rigtig glad for, at jeg nu kan skifte over til engelsk og præsentere Peter. Welcome, Peter, and thank you very much for being part of this webinar. We are so happy that you are going to do this masterclass for our participants. So, Peter, please share your screen and take over from here.
Okay, thank you so much, Ahmed, and welcome everybody to this short webinar. I'd love to see a few more faces. If you want to switch on your cameras, it's much better to see smiling Danish faces in front of me. Okay, so I'm going to talk about growth strategies in a fast-changing world. And this is a very short session and just giving you a few quick thoughts in terms of what it takes to develop a strategy as a small business, or maybe even a big business, but particularly today I'm focusing on small businesses, in a world which is changing incredibly fast, which is complex and which is uncertain. So what does it take? Well, I spend my life going around the world and meeting lots and lots of companies, both big companies and small companies, but in every different sector and every different region. And what strikes me is actually the huge passion to make things happen and to seize opportunities. And whilst the world is a scary place, whilst we have great uncertainty as to what will happen next, perhaps more than ever, people are still kind of passionate. People are still kind of focused in terms of how can you seize on the opportunities of change. These are some of the companies I work with, and I've written 10 books over the last 20 years. And so the latest book is Business Recoded. But more important than that is the stories I get of the places I go to and the companies and the people I meet. This is one example. And last year, I found myself in Iceland. And so I went about 40 kilometers south of Reykjavik, and I came across this machine. I don't know if anybody knows what this machine is. Still, nobody's got their cameras on. But this is the world's largest direct air capture machine. So it's sucking carbon dioxide out of the air and then it's separating it, either to put the carbon under the ground safely or to turn it into renewable materials. And it's developed by Climeworks, which is a Swiss company. They started almost 15 years ago, and they were a spin out from one of the Swiss universities. And they find themselves in Iceland because of the power of geothermal energy. And they've grown rapidly across the world. And one of the most interesting things is, how do they make money? And I was asking their founders this, and they said, well, the business model is perhaps the most important thing today. So being able to think about how do you kind of reinvent a business model? So not just selling products. And their biggest customer, Climeworks' biggest customer, is actually Microsoft. So Microsoft wanting to offset their carbon, and so from their data centers, and therefore being the biggest kind of revenue source for Climeworks and many other similar companies too. But if we look across the world today, we see incredible numbers of companies shaking up markets, both big companies, startups alike. And being able to kind of change the expectations of customers, change the opportunities, and quite often creating new market spaces. So if you look at SpaceX, 380 launches last year. If you look at Colossal Biosciences, which is the best funded startup in Silicon Valley right now, not a digital company, but a biotech company, that's using gene editing to reinvent extinct species like the hairy mammoth or the dodo bird. If you go across to China, you'll see a company which only started 10 years and now is almost as big as Apple and competing in terms of the smartphone and the tablet kind of space. They think that things as good as Apple, but 10 times cheaper. Last year, they launched their first car. So not just satisfied with being in the devices business, but moving into new sectors. They launched a SU7, which you can see here, 10 times cheaper than the Porsche Taycan, which has a very similar specification. So instead of around 200,000 euros, 22,000 euros. And then Mounjaro is another example, and so kind of almost eclipsed Novo Nordisk at the moment in terms of being able to think about how do you address people's wellness in new and different ways. So with your startups or with your big businesses, every marketplace has been shaken up and disrupted. Here's one example of an entrepreneur who, one of my favorite entrepreneurs who I met in Tallinn in Estonia. And he started his business when he was 18. And 15 years later, you probably all know Bolt today, one of the fastest growing digital technology companies in Europe and the fastest growing mobility company in the world. Take a look at this video just to get a feel of what it's like inside Bolt.
We have Bolt.
That was kind of fast, right? Well, that's how we like to
Bro, we have Bolt, one of Europe's leading tech companies. with almost 100 million customers and over 2,000 employees. No other company at this scale moves at this
Speed. Here are some examples. It took us 5 years to reach 10 million customers. Now we're adding 10 million every 2 months. Instead of reducing headcount during lockdown, we added another 500 employees and launched
scooters and food delivery in 74 cities in 12 months. But that wasn't enough, so we launched car sharing with Bolt Drive, and that took us 4 months.
And grocery delivery followed just 1 month later. That's 2 new business lines in 5 months.
How did we do it? Well, we don't spend time on bureaucracy. Instead, we move fast in small teams where everybody acts like an owner.
So 13 owners launched Bolt Market in 1 month. So when others are doing this,
we're doing this. As the company grows, so did we. I started as a customer support specialist. And now I'm a regional lead.
And I started as a recruiter. And now I'm a global recruitment manager.
And I've been here for 4.5 years, which is the Bolt average. That's 1.5 years more than the industry average.
And I joined Bolt when it was just a small Estonian startup. Now it's the world's fastest growing mobility platform.
Let's go.
So Bolt is a great example of a company which is growing incredibly fast at speed, getting rid of bureaucracy, thinking about how can you work in really small teams, lots and lots of experiments, not afraid to go beyond the boundaries of the traditional business, reinventing the business model, seizing data and using it in different ways. When they're doing the experiment, if things don't work, they kill it quickly and move on to the next thing. And being able to move people across the business and to grow in the business at the same time. So startups are an incredibly exciting environment, and you can get that in medium-sized business and larger businesses too. And if you look at the founders, that's where you really see the passion. And as those founders grow over time, so if you look at somebody like Jensen Huang, it's 30 years since he started NVIDIA in a small burger joint in Sunnyvale, California. Jensen Huang had a passion for gaming. He wanted to create a better microprocessor which could play better games. And that's always been his passion. And gradually he's evolved. And it's only really in the last 4 years that his company became a $1 trillion, $2, $3, $4, $5 trillion company. If you look at Nick Storensky, so Europe's largest startup, who is still leading the business at Revolut, the financial services company, his passion was always the traveling customer. How can you solve the problem and make life better for that traveling customer? If you look at Melanie Perkins, who by 35 had become a billionaire from Australia, she started Canva, which is reinventing the entire design and print business across the world. So from gifting through to kind of documents and cards. Or you look at somebody like Malaika in Denmark, Malaika Boysten Henning. So she started a fashion business which is made from zero waste. So it's a sustainable fashion business. She started in New York and truly had this passion for how can you create fantastic designs and you never waste a single bit of fabric over time. And so those passions kind of continue in the organization and they spread and become a culture which is infectious across other people too. But as you grow a business, lots of people think growth is about getting bigger. It's not. And if you look at the biggest companies in today, they're rarely the most profitable, and even less, they're the least valuable. They're not often the most valuable. Even companies like PepsiCo, twice as big as Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola is twice as valuable as PepsiCo. Or if you look at something like Volkswagen versus Tesla, Volkswagen's 3 times bigger in revenue sales than Tesla. Tesla's 25 times more valuable. So it's not just about being able to sell. It's not even just about being able to be profitable in the short term. It's about where you're going and what is your future potential. So growth is about focus in today's world. What are you going to focus on? Why do you exist? What is your passion? And how is that different from other people's? Who are the customers who are disproportionately important? Don't try and serve everyone. And then how do you make that happen in a focused, disciplined business model? It's about design of the product and service, the customer experience, but also the design of how the business works. Don't try and do everything yourself. Design an ecosystem of partners who can help you to do things. Don't feel you have to have all the capabilities in-house. You can find other people who can help you. Seize the opportunity, focus on the opportunity rather than focus on what you have already or what you did in the past. And then it's about speed and it's about agility, the ability to keep changing as the world keeps changing too. So let's look at some companies who are truly accelerating growth today and say, what can we learn from those companies? So here's 6 companies, and you've already met one of them, which is Climeworks from Switzerland. But Lovable comes from Sweden, and these 2 guys, Anton Osika and Fabian Hedden, they started Lovable only 5 years ago. And over that time, they've become one of the world's leaders in vibe coding. So this is a completely new AI-supported way in which you can code a website or you could create an app in minutes, not days or years, but in minutes and at very, very minimal cost. So Lovable is already a $7 billion business in a very, very short time, and they want to become Europe's first $1 trillion business. Then you've got people like Nothing on the right-hand side, who are led by Carl Pei. Now, just today in London, which is where I'm based, I was watching a launch event with their community, a huge community of followers, a bit like Macworld 20 years ago, but people who are following Nothing and really thinking differently. So Climeworks is a great example in terms of being able to start off with the support of a new idea, a new technology, a new software, but more importantly, to solve an important problem. And solving problems are perhaps one of the most important things to think about first. And then to scale up gradually, starting small with an experiment in terms of the machines which can capture carbon in different ways. And if that works, then move to the next level. And if that works, move to the next level. So don't spend too much money quickly and don't spend too long thinking about how can you create the perfect solution. Start by creating something. And when I visited Climeworks, they were actually on their 3rd format of carbon capture, and you could see the previous 2 formats on their same site nearby. So constantly experimenting and moving forwards. When you look at Lovable, Lovable launched their viral AI web builder just 2 years ago. But huge passion for what they do. They want to share with their audience, share with their customers, but equally with their people who they work at the same time. So what they do is to work as an ecosystem. So a relatively small company, but working with many, many partners in order to be able to be linked in to the marketplaces which are wanting their services and to be able to use bigger companies as their vehicles to reach customers. So rather than trying to do it all yourself and sales and marketing yourself, find somebody who you can attach to is often one of the best strategies. I call them pilot fish strategies. After there's very small fish who attach themselves to the big whales in the ocean, and they're safe because they're always protected by the whale because they clean the skin of the whale at the same time. Or if you look at Nothing, then Nothing is using this vibe coding technique created by Lovable to create a new form of electronic devices. Started with headphones, very small, simpler experiment. Then it moved to smartphones. It's now in its 4th generation. Then it moved to watches. And so constantly moving in terms of experiment with the next level after the next level after the next level. In the 5 years they've been in existence, they've raised over $500 million, and they're now worth around about $1.5 billion and growing incredibly fast. I would not be surprised if Nothing will become one of the biggest talked about companies in Europe within the next 2 years. Then you've got companies who have got a passion not just for technology, but using technologies to solve problems of the environment or society. These are two guys who used to work for a big company, in their case, Unilever. And they formed a company which they said, we want to do something better, which we believe we can do faster as a small business. And they wanted to replace plastics. And so they created a seaweed material, which replaced the plastic and started to kind of create new packaging. Their first product, which they created, was a digestible seaweed-based package to put water in. And it was like a ball, and they called it Uhu ball. And you could pop the water into your mouth, and it just burst open, and then you could chew the packaging at the same time and digest it. In the London Marathon, they replaced 100,000 drinks bottles made of plastic with Uhu water balls. Or, of course, you could just put tequila in and let it explode into your mouth and then chew on it. So Notpla is another business, but people taking the kind of the courageous step to say, let's do it ourselves rather than waiting for a big business to do it. And actually, their biggest customer today is Unilever, the company who they left behind. Silver is a company who only started 2 weeks ago, but already incredibly fast growing. And this company is doing shoppable TV. And so they're using AI technology to be able to understand exactly anything which you see in a movie or on a television show. And just like Emily in Paris kind of dreams that she could do, then being able to kind of say, I want to buy that exact same product right now. So this starts to fundamentally change marketing. And Silver have very wisely, and it's two ex-Google guys, again, who kind of stepped out of the big business to start their own business, who are working with an ecosystem of brands and media platforms and technology companies in order to make that happen. They have the idea, they have the relationships, and they're connecting this ecosystem to make it work. Remember, in today's world, it's not how big you are, it's not even how many technologies you own yourself. It's about bringing together the partners and the idea, the intellectual property, and then the patents, which particularly matter. And the final one is a $9 billion company, which started 8 years ago. And this is the fastest growing automotive company in Europe right now. You probably haven't heard of it, Wave. So it's developing autonomous driving technology and has just formed a big partnership with Uber. And so when Uber launches it won't be using Waymo, which was developed by Alphabet, but it'll be using a more local partner, Wave, to navigate the streets in a much more localized way. So they're using data from existing driver behavior in order to kind of then complement the driving technology within the car itself. So those 6 companies, and if you start to look at those 6 companies a little bit more detail. So on the left-hand side, we've got the founders and the origins. So you can see that they're all from Europe, so Switzerland or Sweden, from the UK, from Paris. Then you've got a vast different industries, all of them in some way, or you could argue, are related to sustainability, some of them directly, some of them indirectly. They have a clarity of who their audience is. They then think incredibly carefully, and you can see the different approaches of their business model. Some of them are B2C companies, most of them are B2B companies or B2B2C companies. All of them don't try and do everything by themselves. And then when you look at the growth steps, you can start to see where they started. And so we talked about Climeworks in terms of starting from a university spin out. Lovable started small with an idea and then built a community around themselves. Nothing started off with earbuds, so a small number of technologists together and then working in collaboration with a manufacturing company to produce something very different for a very passionate audience. Notpla started with one customer, its previous employer, their previous employer. Silver has now started again with one company in terms of the media platform and then a number of brands who they work with and have a plan to really scale that very quickly. And then Wave started like Climeworks as a university spin out and then growing and is still incubated despite being an $8 billion business. So what do we take? What do we take and what can you take from these companies? Well, 5 things I think you can take away in this short session today. And each of these steps will build on in much more detail in the program in terms of how do you do it. The first step really is to explore change. Change is your big opportunity. And I don't know if you saw the announcement 4 weeks ago, I think it was, SpaceX are preparing for their IPO, and they announced the acquisition or the merger of SpaceX with xAI. Why does a space and satellite company want to link with an AI and social media company? Is the interesting question. But then when you look a bit further, the reason is because within 10 years, not just SpaceX, but also Alphabet and Microsoft believe that the vast majority of data centers will be in space. Much better access to energy and zero carbon emissions. So being able to put data centers into space is the next big step. And SpaceX might be doing it themselves with xAI. Alphabet is using a small startup, Rocket Labs, which does 3D printed rockets from New Zealand in order to get its data centers up into space. So working in partnership to seize new opportunities. So constantly looking for where are these opportunities? Where is disruption to the previous ways of doing things? Where are the value shifts in terms of how value is created for customers and can be captured back for business? So opportunity lives in change. So what is becoming outdated in the areas which you're interested in? What are the frustrations of people and businesses in those areas, or maybe governments too? And what are the new behaviors which are emerging, often on the edges, on the margins of markets, people doing things in different ways from the normal? They are your opportunities. So in the program, we particularly start off by looking at the megatrends. These are the big trends which permeate across every marketplace across the world. And then we think about, well, what does that mean for you? So megatrend 1 is all about saying AI, yes, but how AI is connecting with technologies. So we've seen physical AI emerge this year very quickly, but it's how the technologies themselves, like blockchain and robotics, are starting to kind of converge and be able to do completely new things. And then you add gene editing to that, or you add energy storage to that as well. Huge opportunities start to emerge from these convergences, from the overlaps in marketplaces. How are customers changing, people changing in Megatrend 2? So particularly the rise of old people. Will have more over 60s than under 18s by 2035. So how do you support that older market, for example? More urban markets, more singledom. So people aren't the homogeneous same groups which we kind of perhaps grew up with or we think about in a slightly lazy way. The third shift is towards Asia in terms of how both can you support that marketplace or act in that marketplace, but also how can you take ideas and new technologies from there. Fourth trend is regenerative systems. How do you take sustainability a step further from net zero to net positive? Fifth trend, multipolar world. So as globalization declines and it's accelerated by conflict and tariffs, then what does that mean in terms of where your best customers are, where your suppliers are, and how do you work in new and different ways to be resilient in that world? And the final one is about humanity rising. So step back and think, where's my opportunity in this world? Where is there a change which I can seize on, where I can do something much, much better? Step 2, in terms of finding growth, define your why, where, and how, not your what. Your why, where, and how, not your what. The product comes later. That's what many people get wrong. They start with the product. But think about the why, where, and how. And if you look at those successful entrepreneurs I've mentioned, they start with a passion, or you could call it purpose. But they have a clear thing which they want to achieve. So what is your purpose? And there, where will you compete? So being clear in terms of what is your purpose and what are you trying to do for the world? What are you trying to deliver, and how is that different from what other people seek to deliver? And then being able to think in more detail in terms of, well, what does that look like? And as I said before, often the best ideas emerge at the intersections or at the overlaps between traditional marketplaces and ways of doing things. So Silver, for example, the shoppable TV company, that's an overlap of the TV market, the content market, and the e-commerce market. So being able to think about what's your why, your where, and your how also then starts to say, well, how can I solve a problem in a better way? And these might be the megatrends. So the megatrends of aging population, for example, you can see in the center there. But how can I use technology to solve that problem in a new way and create something better? So take the technology, apply it to the problem of the changing world, and then say, how can I create something better for the world? A new type of food like Notco from Chile, for example, or the way in which children are educated in Finland today, peer-to-peer. Step 3 is then saying, how can you solve the customer's problem? I still have not mentioned the word product. So think about the customer's problem now. So you've got a customer who's in the purpose space. You're thinking about, you've already defined where and how you want to